Welcome to the Engineering Success Podcast. Today, we have Shreyas, Senior Engineering Manager at Culture Ramp, with us. We'll discuss the end of the ZIRP era and its effects on tech companies, changes in engineering management, and balancing team performance, culture, and innovation. So let's dive right into it. Now, over to our host, CEO of Dev Dynamics, Pru.
Shreyas, there's been a lot of talk of the end of the ZIRP era, the zero interest rate phenomenon, and what it means for organizations and especially engineering orgs, and whether it could be managers or developers or even engineering leadership. So in your opinion, what does it mean, or how have you seen it play out and just to add context, the zero interest rate phenomenon was when the interest rates were very low. So there was a lot of funding, which of course led to a lot of hiring and boom happening in tech for the last decade plus. And that kind of slowing down now, which means that multiple things, but for different startups. But I would love to know your take on what that means for engineering leaders right now and going ahead.
Cool. I think the first thing that comes to mind is basically the expectations have risen, I think, from everyone in the engineering team, whether it's the engineers or the engineering leader. And that certainly has been the case so far in my role at Culture Amp, and I presume at other companies that I worked at as well. I'm sure the environment has changed massively, but I can tell you how it's affected me personally. So I joined this company as a tech lead with possibly 3 or 4 direct reports and a directive to be hands-on fairly regularly, like 30 to 40% of my time. And over the last 9 months or so, that role no longer doesn't exist in its previous form anyway. And now basically most of these tech leads or delivery leads or leads that were managing an entire team, it's been consolidated into a single role, either as a team lead or an EM. That means that you have more people reporting to you, and hence you have less time to be more hands-on on whatever else you were doing on the side before. Now it's just mostly all about making sure your team is performing like a well-oiled machine, whilst basically doing one-on-ones and all of the people management BAU things that you need to do for about 8 to 9 people. So we're looking at a ratio of 7 to 9 people per team lead. That's been the change that I've seen, and I think that's probably a bit on the high side. I think my sweet spot personally is between 5 plus or minus 2, but I think the expectations have risen, and you're expected to manage more people and to manage your team and make sure that they're functioning like a well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I think that's what we are hearing from other engineering leaders as well, which is more people reporting into a team lead EM position. There has also been some talk of slightly maybe adjacent responsibilities coming into the EM engineering management umbrella, whether it could be TPM, like technical program management. There is even maybe in some companies product management type responsibilities, or maybe engineering orgs being asked to be more product focused, customer focused. Is that also what you're seeing? Not necessarily in your current org, but is any kind of thoughts on that? Or
Yeah, I'm definitely seeing that in my current org as well. Like I said before, the team leadership model before was shared between tech lead and delivery lead, who had possibly shared number of direct reports within the team, and they work together to move the team forward. But now that role has been fused into one. So it's engineering manager is responsible for delivery, project management, like you said, looking after dependencies. If your team has a lot of dependencies across the org, making sure that all those dependencies are coming together, it falls on the EM or the team lead's shoulders in this case. So yeah, that's been definitely, that's been the case in my experience so far. Yeah.
Okay. So in this kind of, when you have more people reporting to you, and it does change some things, but I think maybe even before this happened, like I just generally wanted to know, you said your sweet spot at 5 plus or minus 2 people. So with that kind of team size, or with the newer team sizes, how do you think about balancing, or how do you think about performance versus the team health versus velocity? Like how do you take care of that?
Good question. I think, yeah.
And does anything change with more number of people coming in?
I think, the main challenge that I have is like a lack of time, right? With the larger team, And that means some of the nice to haves that as an EM, I really like being hands-on and being close to the code and having all that technical context when I'm having conversations with the team. And it means that I've had less time to do that. So that's been a huge challenge for me, balancing. But in terms of performance, I think, yeah, like the metrics really come into play. I think there, keeping an eye on things like cycle time, like how much work do we, like in a large team, one thing that I've found is it's easy to pick up many concurrent pieces of work because you're large. And that's something that it's a pet peeve of mine, like just because you have 9 people on the team, starting 9 concurrent pieces of work doesn't necessarily mean you're the most high performing team, right? So
a lot of work in progress kind of has downstream effects.
Yeah. So keeping an eye on cycle time and our work WIP is probably 2 things that I do a lot. And I constantly give feedback to the team if we have too many in progress, or if something's taking too long, why is it taking too long, asking questions and keeping them accountable. So those are the sort of things I'm doing to keep performance at a reasonable level.
Yeah. No, I think it's pretty interesting, but with the more number of people reporting to you as a EM who would like to be more hands-on with the code, which is also an expectation. So there are 2 now expectations which are battling with each other, what we are seeing in the industry. One is that engineering managers should be more hands-on, and then the semi-controversial statement that Kabak made last year where EMs should also be able to code, and like slightly flattening of the org and whatever. And we still, I think I'm also still divided on that, whether you really want to go in that direction. But if you want EMs to be more hands-on, but also have more people reporting to the EMs while also a culture not completely getting affected, like something has to give. So yeah, I see 2 conflicting kind of expectations happening with managers, and my sympathies for being able to balance that. I think at least for the foreseeable future, maybe something will give there, and some of these responsibilities might get divided between the TL EM structure. Not sure. I think people are still discussing that.
It's probably gonna go back at some point to the way it was. Like it always goes in circles, right?
Yeah, it's a pendulum. I think it's swung a bit, saying that EMs should manage more people, but they should also be more hands-on. But and a couple of these things, I think that can be super challenging. One of the things that we talk about a lot here is the lack of like a playbook or any kind of guiding sort of material about engineers in the engineering kind of career ladder. So how do you go from a dev to either, if it's on the dev path, to staff engineer, like IC role, that's a different path. But here we are more, I think, interested in the engineering management ladder, from a dev to a team lead to a EM to a VP to a director to CTO to maybe CEO, right? And so we really want to create like a corpus of knowledge which can help people through this transition. So for you, what is it that you wish you knew, or what is it that was surprising for you when you made your last career transition? So I think it might be team lead to EM, or it can even be dev to team lead. You can talk about both. Yeah.
Yeah. So my last transition was being a lead engineer to becoming an EM, and I think that transition was, given the environment I was in, it wasn't actually a difficult transition, but the transition that I've made in the last year, which is changing domains from a startup to a scale up, which happened in the last year or so, and going into a completely new domain, from a domain that I was very comfortable with to a foreign domain. I was a firmware engineer for most of my career, writing C++, now HR tech, Ruby. I love Ruby, but haven't done much back-end development in a commercial sense. So coming and leading a team, doing in a completely different context in a different domain, that transition has been surprising in the sense it's been surprisingly easier than I thought it would be, because I've had to lead because I don't know the tech stack well enough, I've had to lead from first principles rather than knowing everything about the tech stack. I've had to rely on my intuition and first principles. And that's, so in a good way, that's been a good surprise. But I think more a hard lesson that I've learned through this transition is, how do you delegate? That's something that I've personally struggled with. I don't think I've nailed that yet. Going from an engineer who had everything in your control, I'm a control freak, and being able to change anything within your confines, of course, and then becoming an EM and not being able to do that work, but empowering other people in the team to work the way that you see as high performing. That's been challenging. And I think that took me a little while to understand how to influence the team in a positive way without doing the work myself. So I think that's a craft that I'm still learning. How do I
Mm.
influence without necessarily doing the work myself? I'm still fairly young in my engineering management journey. I'm only 4 to 5 years in. I was mostly an engineer. So yeah, I think delegation is probably one that comes out to me that I'm probably not so good at, and I'm still learning. Yeah, so that's yeah, and it's not something that there's no playbook, like you said. There's no playbook.
Mm.
I've had to learn it the hard way and have a good support network around me, have a good manager who cares. You can talk about these sorts of things. You learn it very organically rather than, hey, maybe you should think about this at the start. Yeah, that's probably one thing that comes to mind.
Okay. Any kind of, so having a support system, and of course, there can be a support system in your org, and like having a good manager, that itself can be a huge kind of advantage. But apart from that, have you sought out mentors, or do you read stuff, or do you like, are there any other resources that you go to or rely on?
Yeah, so I guess my biggest people leadership influence, or even tech leadership in general, has been in my 15-year career, has been probably Twitter, following the likes
Amazing.
of Kent Beck, Uncle Bob, Martin Fowler, all of these people. I looked up to them, read their books, and I religiously followed them on Twitter and read every post they put up. And that was like first 10 to 12 years of my career. I was really good at that, I felt, and I learned a lot. I was looking forward to new content from them all the time. So I'd say that was my number one like source of knowledge. And as I became more senior, that probably you hit a ceiling there. I'm going to get any paradigm shifts from reading more of the same stuff.
Mm.
So from there, I think it was more, how do I build a support network that will help me, I guess, grow in different ways? And that's been like networking with other EMs in the company or going to meetups where there are other EMs maybe facing the same challenges as you, or other tech leaders facing the same challenges as you. That's been great. And yeah, that's probably the few things that come to mind. And reading as well. Reading, I love reading. I read a lot of people leadership books, read a lot of books about culture. I have less time to do that these days, but it's something that I really value. And yeah, I would say that's probably the third, probably most impactful source of knowledge for me, reading books, Twitter, other people, feedback from people, managers, peers, direct reports, everyone, and then probably books, probably three
Yeah.
things that come to mind. Yeah.
No, as a fellow Twitter, I refuse to call it X. As a fellow Twitter
I
addict,
don't call it X.
as a fellow Twitter addict, I completely agree about the amount of learning that I've had through that platform over the years.
Yeah, incredibly grateful. It's a shame that it's no longer what it was.
Yeah.
Now LinkedIn has become my platform, I feel, more than Twitter. And I think a lot of people are shifting away from X to LinkedIn. LinkedIn is actually pretty
Mm.
good now. Yeah. Now I would say the source of knowledge is LinkedIn, following people that I look up to and reading the posts once in a while. That's
Yeah.
probably a really good source of knowledge.
Especially for professional kind of stuff, as we're talking about, LinkedIn has gotten really good at it now.
Yeah.
I think still a couple of more tools to help you sort between stuff like lists and like
Yeah.
all of that would be. But I think given the way they have the velocity with which they keep shipping at LinkedIn, I'm pretty sure it's coming somewhere down the line. Just changing tack slightly to again look at what's happening maybe outside and slightly macro is AI. And there is a lot of talk about AI and how it disrupts. I think most recently, a company, magic.dev, is another 100 million or so to become like the next generation of developer copilot, so to speak. So there's a lot of talk about how AI disrupts software development, but towards the coding part of it. One is, of course, I'd love to know your thoughts on that and how you guys are maybe using it, or how you are seeing it being used, not necessarily in your own org. But I'm quite interested in seeing how it changes management, right? Management in general, but let's say engineering management. How does AI change it? How does it make it better? Are EMs going away? I don't think so. I think management structure is there for a reason. But would love to kind of know your thoughts and discuss that a little bit with you.
Sure. I've used Copilot a fair bit, and yeah, mostly in a C++ context, and that was really useful. C++ and Python, actually. And I found it really useful to entirely eliminate boilerplate, or you write the name of a function, it will just immediately fill it out. And especially when experimenting and trying something new, it was great. So it's been a couple of years since I did that, but I found it super useful. And I know people in my company and team are using Copilot now as well, more from Ruby and TypeScript perspective, but yeah, I think it's making developers at least 10 to 20% more efficient, if not more. That was my experience for sure, because it eliminated a lot of the busy work. But in terms of like how it improves engineering management, I think especially when you get to a director or a VP, like how do you VP of engineering or director of engineering, what are the signals that you really should care about at that level for your org? I think to get those sorts of metrics or that signal, it takes a lot of work. So how can you like eliminate that busy work for leaders to basically surface the signal from the noise sooner so they can work on more impactful problems for their orgs and do it sooner rather than having a really slow feedback loop? And how can they do it sooner? So that's, I think, where there's probably going to be some movement in the near future. How can we provide data in a very digestible and being able to ask intelligent questions of that data so they can make very informed decisions to know that they're doing the right thing for the org.
Amazing. I think you've given 2-3 things here. One is signals, and getting the signals takes the time to signal probably is high right now. And then, I think then it goes down into that kind of loop, right? And maybe, I'm not sure if we're still thinking about it, and do agents play a part here? You talked about eliminating busy work, and do agents eliminate that busy work on your behalf, like acting like an agent for you and doing stuff on your behalf? And those are some things that we are pretty psyched about and keep talking about. It's still trying to understand where that will come in and what kind of structure that will fit in. This is amazing and definitely an exciting time for seeing how this kind of plays out. Is there, sorry, you're saying something?
No, sorry, I said, completely agree. Yeah. It's an exciting time. Yeah, I don't know. It's crazy to be part of so many paradigm shifts in a short career. It's crazy.
Yeah, too much of a good thing, or not that we mind. Shreyas, how do you think about, we've talked about performance and like balancing performance and team health. How do you think about building like the right engineering culture?
A really good quote comes to mind for me. Like, I actually believe in it. I think culture is the worst behavior you tolerate on a team.
Wow. Yeah.
Basically, what are you doing when no one's looking? and do you get away with it? Is I think, like epitome of culture in my head. So how can you build a culture where it's the opposite? Like worst bad behavior is not tolerated and there's prompt feedback given. And I think, feedback is probably something that I really hold dearly in my heart. How do you build a culture of feedback in a team? And I think that is the root of a high-performing team, if you ask me. How do you give feedback to each other regularly? How do you be constructive at the same time without ruffling feathers? And how do you get to a psychologically safe space where you can challenge each other, challenge an idea, not necessarily each other, without getting offended? And that's something I'm really passionate about. And seeing a team go on a journey from where there's not a lot of psychological safety to get to a point where, like a junior on the team, a person who's just joined, can give feedback to the EM or to the principal engineer in the team or whoever, someone in a position of authority, and say, hey, you did something last week. I didn't like it because of this. And then say that in a public forum with the whole team. Like, I've seen that happen and it's pretty special. How do you get to that spot? I think is something that I really enjoy, seeing that journey. And there's a few ways you can go about. There's a lot of ways to go about influencing a feedback culture in the team. One particular method that I really enjoyed, and I would love to implement in my current team as well, is the idea of this live feedback 360 dinners. Basically, your whole team goes out to dinner or lunch, whatever, and you're already in a psychologically safe space where you can basically give constructive critical feedback to each other in front of everyone else in the team. How do you get to that? And being part of 2 of those conversations, and it was really special, and it's something I'll remember for the rest of my career, I think. And the first one that we ran as a team, I nominated myself to be the first to get feedback, and to get feedback from the team. They didn't hold back. They just gave me one critical feedback after the other. It hurt. It hurt. But after that meeting, I was really proud, because to get to that point, it takes something pretty special. I think to create that culture, it's pretty special. You should really cherish that. And that's something that I've found work really well. I'd love to do that in my current team, but I don't think we're there yet. But we're definitely on a journey to get there. And I really like this, again, another model that I came across in a book called, I think it was Connect from memory. It's the idea of like pinches and crunches. And and just surfacing. And these take many forms in books and stuff, but I really like this terminology. And a pinch is something that is a tiny little niggle that's bothering you, and if you don't address it soon, then it could become a crunch. And a crunch is something that is, if you don't resolve it,
Okay.
it's something that it's either you leave the team or you leave the company, and it's like a deal breaker type thing. How can you be on top of pinches before they become into crunches? And how can you share that openly with your manager or with the team so we can nip them in the bud? And that's something that I've, again, seen implemented really well in my previous team, and that worked really well. And yeah, it was pretty special place to be when you get to that spot. What else? And in terms of feedback, I think, yeah, what else am I thinking? Yeah, leading by example, really. How can you lead by example and foster, I guess, a culture of feedback? And again, that comes down to you being open to, as a leader, being open to feedback and asking for feedback regularly from anyone you interact with on the team, whether it's in a one-on-one, always making it a point to ask them, hey, is there anything I can do better? Anything you've seen in the last 2 weeks that you saw that maybe I could have done better? Rather than asking a really generic question, do you have any feedback for me? Asking a more bounded question works really well. Yeah, how can you lead by example? So those are some things that I've tried to establish a feedback culture, and it's worked out okay. Yeah, and it's something I would do again.
This is amazing, Shreyas. There's so many, I think there are at least 3, 4 things that I've underlined here, but I would love to jump into that. And it's another reason why doing this podcast is so amazing, because we'll keep meeting people like you who like thought so deeply about one thing, are so passionate about that, and we all get to learn from it. I think you said that keeping the feedback, instead of just saying that, do you have any feedback for me, keeping it bounded. Can you give an example of that?
Yeah, something that I've tried by trial and error is I've asked people, do you have any feedback for me? And generally that means that you don't get feedback. Because
Okay.
it's quite a generic, broad question, and it puts people on the spot. So if you can bound that question into something a little bit more specific, and that could be, hey, there was this meeting last week that I facilitated. Do you think I could have done a better job facilitating
Doing
that
like a
meeting?
memory
It's
trigger,
a much
or
more bounded question, right? Like very
right.
specific to a context
Yeah.
that people will hopefully remember as well. Then they can give you like very specific feedback. So
Yeah.
be very specific when you ask for feedback is something that I had to learn through trial and error. Yeah.
No, I think what you're saying is maybe creating that memory kind of trigger of that, hey, remember when we did that and during that, and then it usually in surveys also, when you do that, when you're trying to ask about the past in the user research, let's say, you try to recreate that situation. What that does is it triggers so many memories for them that you'll get much richer kind of answers.
Correct.
That's great. I think one other way maybe that some slightly companies which are more on the radical scale of transparency. I think one of the popular ones is the hedge fund Bridgewater. I think Bridgewater is known for, I think that would be on the extreme scale where everyone gives feedback all the time. Ray
Dalio's company, right? Is that right?
Yeah, I think they used to be well known for that. I think a part of it, from what I remember, also plays out at a little bit of this is at Netflix, which could be that because you forget the feedback and then you might have to create the situation where you have to remember. Of course, that has advantages. I think if as the organizations become maybe more transparent, and this can be hard to do, is that give feedback on the spot while it is happening before you forget. But then like it does require like a lot of effort for people to take feedback maybe all the time. And yeah, it's a huge challenge to how do you build like a culture like that.
Yeah. When you just mentioned that, like, how do you give that feedback? Another thing that I guess model came to mind, and this one is again from that book Connect, which I mentioned pinches and crunches from. It's the idea of crossing the net, and it's something that I've used quite, I guess, reasonably well in when I had to give feedback to someone. If you imagine a net and you want to give some constructive feedback to someone, how can you stay on your side of the net without crossing the net into their side? And that means staying in your reality, staying on your side of reality rather than questioning their reality. Like going into, for example, if you start to use words like you in the feedback and you're going into the other side, but if you stay on your side and say, hey, I felt this way when you said that thing, then it becomes they become a lot less defensive and more receptive to your feedback. So all of these little things make a huge difference when you give constructive feedback to someone. And yeah, I've seen that model work really well for me.
Yeah, this is amazing. You're giving us so many of these visual terms like crossing the net, and sports kind of terms or war kind of terms always work out, right? In any place when people are working together. Because we have seen this, but like you've given us a term now, which is crossing the net, like not going into, hey, you did this, but this is how I perceived it, or this is how it looks from my angle.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I think one other thing is that, of course, psychological safety being very important to create the feedback doesn't create like it has the opposite effect of creating like a slightly toxic culture. So having that maybe 360 feedback dinners, like that's a super interesting idea to maybe look into. And one thing that you brought up earlier, which is the worst behavior you tolerate on a team. So that is such an interesting way to think about this, because let's say you want to have a great culture, but you want to improve the culture, or you want to improve the culture, right? A lot of the advice you will get, and especially because both of us are like Twitter degenerates, so to speak, will be from Silicon Valley, and like a lot of because that's like for us, that's where a lot of that advice maybe comes from. And a lot of the advice seems to be going to might be too far out there, which is how to create an extremely high performing culture. And it might look like there are too many steps. Maybe starting with a small step is that we're just not going to tolerate this. So let's take it one step at a time. Let's at least not do this. And then that can actually create like a step-by-step ladder to creating a great culture. I think I'm not sure. This is just something I'm thinking about right now, is that maybe if too many companies try to change the culture too much in one go, and then that creates a bit of chaos, and people might even be like, hey, this is not what I signed up for. This seems like a bit of a bait and switch. But maybe start by, we won't tolerate this, and then maybe after 2 months it's okay, we're not going to do that, and then maybe take people together on that journey.
Yeah, for sure. That would definitely work a lot better, I think.
Shreyas, in engineering is, how does engineering get a voice at the table, the seat at the table? And this is especially from our chat with leader. They say that this is one skill that you have to start getting good at early on, is to understanding engineering rather than being inward focused, seeing how engineering is playing a part. So would love to know your thoughts on that.
Great question. I think for me, the way that I think about it is how can everyone in the engineering team be product obsessed? And I feel the only way you'll get a seat at the table is by having an outsized impact, your team having an outsized impact. And I think the only way that can happen is by being obsessed about your customers, taking product seriously at all levels. And that means engineers caring deeply about the product, the EM caring deeply about the product, and not just the product manager, which has traditionally been the case, the product manager giving direction to the team and going away and implementing something. How can everyone on the team start to really care about the product, start caring about the user experience, thinking about what are the latencies for, say, like page loads, like taking that really seriously as a team, rather than saying product coming back to us and saying, hey, this is slow, how can we make it better? How can engineers, the team
more
engineering
proactive
team,
rather than
be more proactive around it, be more proactive, have tooling around these sorts of things, internal SLOs for the team, and be product obsessed, and get to a point where you understand your customer so deeply that you're solving their problems before they even mention anything. That to me, I think it's probably a pretty naive opinion, but that to me is probably how an engineering team should work. At least that's my philosophy right now. And I think if you do that consistently enough, then you'll have an outsized impact, and it'll affect the bottom line. All of that will come, I think, and that should hopefully lead to you getting a seat at the table.
Amazing, because, and I would like to correct you, I don't think it's naive. As you go on in life and in your career, remember, so many things come back to the basics. And it's in the noise, it can be very hard to lose sight of the basics. But it's just, people like software that works. People like software that works fast. Like if it's faster, it's better. And if it's more coherent, or it just makes sense, all the explanations are there where they need to be, it's better. I think if just these 2 or 3 things can just suddenly make you have an outsized impact in terms of churning out better products.
100%.
So absolutely, it's all about the basics here.
And what I'd like to add one more thing to that is, how can you dog food your own product? And that's something that we're really trying to get good at Culture Amp now. In my current role, we call it Customer Zero. We are
Customer Zero. Wow.
How can we
You're like a one-man term coining machine.
These are not my terms. I'm just borrowing someone else's.
I'll give, from my point of view, I'm hearing some of them from you for the first time. And as a connoisseur of good terms and visual analogies, this is pretty great stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can you really have empathy for your users and start to really put yourself in their shoes? And how can you, for example, involve your own company in testing, like something we did recently when before we EAP'd the product to a set of customers, we made it live for internally first, got a whole bunch of testing done, got a whole lot of feedback, fixed it, then we pushed it out to customers. So how can we do more of that sort of thing where we're taking it really seriously, we really care, and having empathy for each other, whoever's using your product, putting yourself in that persona's shoes when you're working on that product, I think goes a long way. And again, it comes down to having good relationship, the EM and the product manager and the team having a great relationship and kind of surfacing up feedback from the customers and taking the team along on that journey rather than, hey, let's, like traditionally what I've seen anyways, let's worry about this and translate that into work for the team. But how do we share this raw feedback with the team so they get taken on this journey? Hopefully they feel the frustration of the users and really start to care. How do we foster this deep sense of care for the product?
No, that's great. And I think one way we tried in a few orgs ago was it does with all of these things that you want in the water supply, when you want it in the culture, you can take steps. And so one of the things we realized was that our docs needed to be better, but then writing docs, and of course the PM is doing it, and of course it's like things are changing, and then you have to take the screenshots, and of course there's limited support for that. But we knew docs were important for a product like that because we could see the analytics of how many people are going through docs. And what we see is sometimes creating this hackathon, right? Like hackathons have so much energy because you create this thing where we'll all come together, we'll probably work through the night, and maybe we'll order pizzas, and we'll all kind of make a semi kind of party out of it. And so we're like, hey, like a hackathon, we'll do a docathon, so which will be for docs. But then if you translate that, if you extend that idea can be taken to, let's do a UX-a-thon, right? Like where maybe there is then UX, that one idea that how do drunk users, do they still understand your product? So maybe you can do that and see if the product is still legible to you, and then keep coming up. And because of that kind of communal and everyone doing it, it can bring energy to it. And so I think engineering teams can do hackathons for more than just hacking on code type of stuff. It can be docs, it can be UX, it can be performance. Hey, everyone go and we'll do how fast is it loading, and 3 people saying on Safari and versus Chrome versus what have you. And someone else will be putting out an Excel sheet, versus if you give it to someone and put that task in Jira, like that task will probably stay there for a long time. So it's something that can be probably experimented with. But no, this is great stuff here. This is amazing stuff, Shreyas, and so happy to get a chance to finally talk to you today. And we hope to speak to you again very soon. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, bro.
That's all for today on the Engineering Success Podcast. Thank you so much for being with us. Stay tuned for more.